Rich man forces 4-year-old girl to walk barefoot on hot coals, but the horse saw and does something. Comment what you think will happen. Your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. Your help is very important. The biting cold of the June morning in Willow Creek seemed to pierce little Lily's bones like invisible knives. Her bare feet trembled against the frozen ground of the farmyard, and silent tears streamed down her face, swollen from crying so much. The little girl, only 4 years old, didn't understand why the world had suddenly become so cruel. Clarence Blackwood, a portly man of 52, stood before her with his arms crossed and his face hardened by hatred. His expensive clothes contrasted sharply with the rustic simplicity of Blackwood Ranch, a property he had dominated with an iron fist for decades. His slicked-back grey hair and small, piercing eyes reflected a coldness that chilled more than the Montana winter wind. "You're going to learn to be careful with other people's things," he growled, adjusting the thick leather belt he wore as a symbol of authority. "That vase cost more money than your mother made in a whole year working here." Lily couldn't stop sobbing. Her small hands rubbed her red eyes, trying to wipe away the tears that wouldn't stop flowing. The girl hadn't broken the vase on purpose. She was just trying to reach a glass of water when she bumped into the living room table. But Clarence didn't want to hear explanations. The farmyard around the main house buzzed with the morning activity of the ranch. Employees passed by carrying sacks of feed and tools, but everyone looked away when they saw the scene unfolding. No one dared to confront the boss, known for his violence and explosive temper. Fear hung in the air like a dense fog. "Where's my mommy?" Lily managed to whisper between sobs, her small, frightened voice echoing in the tense silence that had formed around them. Clarence laughed bitterly, a harsh, unpleasant sound that made some birds take flight from the nearby trees. "Your mother, Rosalie, took off weeks ago without a word, abandoned you like a stray dog." The lie hit Lily like a punch to the stomach. She knew that her mother would never abandon her, but Clarence's cruel words planted a seed of doubt in her young heart. Confusion mixed with the physical pain of the wounds on her feet, which were still bleeding from the previous punishment. It was then that a movement in the nearby corral caught everyone's attention. A majestic white horse raised its head over the wooden fence, its alert ears catching every sound of the argument. The animal, a stallion of approximately 10 years with a coat as immaculate as fresh snow, had deep brown eyes that seemed to understand more than any animal should. The horse watched the scene for a few seconds, its tense body showing increasing agitation. When Clarence moved closer to Lily, raising his hand threateningly, something inside the animal seemed to awaken. With a loud, piercing whinny that echoed throughout the property, the horse jumped the fence with impressive agility. "Damn animal!" Clarence bellowed, recoiling instinctively when the horse positioned itself between him and the girl. The stallion didn't show direct aggression, but its posture was clear. It wouldn't allow anyone to hurt the child. Its defined muscles trembled slightly, ready to act if necessary. The white mane swayed in the cold wind, creating an almost ethereal image in the middle of the dusty farmyard. Lily looked at the animal with a mixture of admiration and relief. There was something in the horse's eyes that reassured her, a kindness that she hadn't found anywhere since her mother had disappeared. Slowly, she extended a trembling little hand towards the animal. "Get out of there, you damn animal!" Clarence shouted, grabbing a wooden stick that was leaning against the wall of the house. "You're not going to defy me on my own property!" But the horse didn't move. On the contrary, it lowered its head to the girl's height, allowing her to touch. Its soft muzzle. The contrast was touching, the injured and frightened child finding comfort in the animal that had decided to protect her for no apparent reason. The tension in the air was palpable. The employees had completely stopped their activities to watch the unusual confrontation. They had never seen an animal defy Clarence Blackwood like that, and the horse's courage inspired a silent admiration that none of them dared to express. "Fine," Clarence said through gritted teeth, his voice filled with repressed anger. "If you two want to stay together, then stay together, but not in the comfort of the main stable." He gestured to two employees who approached hesitantly. "Take the girl and that horse to the old stable in the back of the property. They can fend for themselves there." The abandoned stable was isolated from the rest of the ranch, an old and poorly maintained building that hadn't been used for years. The wooden walls were eaten away by time and rain, and the roof had several leaks that made the structure damp and cold during the winter. Lily walked beside the horse, her small hand occasionally touching the animal's soft fur to make sure it was still there. The horse adjusted its pace to match the girl's short strides, demonstrating a patience and understanding that moved even the most hardened employees. When they arrived at the abandoned stable, the reality of the situation became even crueler. The place was dark, cold, and smelled of accumulated mold. Some of the floorboards were loose and there were cobwebs in every corner. There was no bed, blankets, or any kind of comfort for a child. "Here's your new home," said one of the employees, with obvious discomfort in his voice. "The boss said to leave you here." As soon as the men walked away, the horse began to sniff every corner of the stable, as if assessing the conditions and looking for the best places to settle. He found a less damp corner where there were some old forgotten straws, and carefully using his muzzle, began to drag the material to form a kind of improvised nest. Lily watched every movement of the animal with fascination. There was something almost human in the way he cared about her well-being, organizing the space so that she had a place to rest. When the horse finished his task, he lay down next to the small pile of straw and looked at her invitingly. The girl understood the gesture and snuggled against the animal's warm body. For the first time since her mother had disappeared, Lily felt safe. The horse remained still, allowing her to use his body as a pillow and source of heat during the cold night that was approaching. Outside, the cold June wind whistled through the trees of the ranch, bringing with it the promise of even more difficult days ahead. The first rays of sun the next morning found Lily trembling violently against the horse's body. The fever had started during the early hours of the morning, and now the girl was delirious, mumbling disconnected words about her mother and asking for water with a hoarse voice that could barely come out of her parched throat. The horse immediately realized that something was wrong. His sharp instincts captured the change in the child's breathing and the abnormal heat emanating from her small body. Carefully, he got up and began to sniff the wounds on Lily's feet, discovering that they had become inflamed during the damp and cold night of the abandoned stable. The infection was spreading rapidly, leaving the wounds red and swollen. Yellowish pus began to form on the edges of the deeper cuts, and the characteristic smell of the infection hung in the stifling air of the stable. The horse whinnied softly, as if trying to draw attention to the girl's serious condition. Back at the main house, Clarence was having his breakfast on the porch, seemingly indifferent to the suffering he had caused. His morning routine included reading local newspapers and checking livestock prices in the regional market. For him, Lily was just a temporary problem that would soon be resolved permanently. But not everything was as calm as it seemed. On the other side of the fence that separated Blackwood Ranch from the neighboring property, Eleanor Fairbanks, a 70-year-old lady with white hair, tied in a bun, and blue eyes still alive despite her advanced age, watched the unusual movement. In the abandoned stable, Eleanor was known throughout the region for her ability to prepare the best summer festival treats in Willow Creek. Her fudge, peanut brittle, and corn cakes were disputed at every party in town. But behind her culinary fame, there was an observant and generous-hearted woman who couldn't ignore the suffering of others. "Something strange is going on at Clarence's ranch," she commented to her grandson Timmy, a 12-year-old boy who helped her with household chores during the school holidays. Yesterday, I saw him yelling at a little child, and today I don't see any movement near the house. Timmy, curious like any boy his age, climbed the wooden fence to try to see better. "Grandma, there's a white horse in the old stable, and it looks like there's someone with him." Eleanor felt a pang in her chest. She had known Clarence for decades and knew perfectly well what he was capable of. During the years of forced coexistence, as neighbors, she had witnessed several situations in which the rancher demonstrated his cruel and vindictive nature. But a child, that was something she couldn't ignore. "Timmy, go get the wicker basket in the kitchen cabinet," she instructed him, a growing determination in her voice. "Let's prepare a few things." Meanwhile, in the stable, Lily's condition was rapidly deteriorating. The fever rose higher and higher, causing her to alternate between moments of delirium and periods of semi-consciousness. In her moments of lucidity, she called for her mother with a voice that broke the "Aunt Mommy? Where's Mommy?" she murmured, clinging to the horse's mane as if it were a lifeline. "I'm scared. I'm so scared." The horse, driven by a protective instinct that he himself did not fully understand, began to gently lick the girl's infected wounds. His saliva, rich in natural antibacterial properties, helped to clean the cuts and slightly reduce the inflammation. It was a slow and painful process, but it represented the only medical care that Lily was receiving. During the afternoon, when the sun was higher and slightly warmed the interior of the stable, Eleanor put her plan into action. She prepared a basket with still warm homemade bread, a bottle of fresh goat's milk, some pieces of brown sugar candy, and a small jar of honey produced by her own bees. "I'm going for a walk around the property," she announced to Timmy, trying to sound casual. "I want to collect some medicinal herbs that grow near the creek." In fact, Eleanor had planned a route that would take her close to the abandoned stable, where she could assess the situation and, if necessary, leave help for whoever was suffering in that forgotten place. When she approached the stable, the horse immediately sensed her presence, but instead of showing aggression, the animal seemed to recognize a benevolent intention in her. He moved slightly away from Lily, allowing Eleanor to clearly see the child's condition. What she saw shocked her deeply. Lily was clearly very sick, with a face flushed with fever and parched lips. Her clothes were dirty and torn, and the smell of infection was noticeable even from a distance. The girl seemed to have lost weight dramatically in just 2 days. "Good heavens," Eleanor whispered, covering her mouth with her hands. "What has that man done to this child?" She looked around, making sure no one was watching, and then approached cautiously. The horse allowed her to get close, as if understanding that she came in peace. Eleanor knelt beside Lily and gently touched her forehead, confirming what she already suspected. The girl had a very high fever. "Honey, can you hear me?" she asked in a low, soft voice. "I'm going to leave some things here for you. There's fresh water and food." Lily opened her eyes slowly, focusing with difficulty on Eleanor's kind face. It was the first time in days that she had seen an expression of affection directed at her, and that made her cry again. "Don't cry, my dear," Eleanor consoled, running her hand lovingly through the girl's tangled hair. "Everything will be all right. I'll take care of you." She left the basket of food within Lily's reach and walked away, but not without making a silent promise. She would find a way to help that child, even if it meant facing Clarence Blackwood's wrath. Upon returning to her house, Eleanor couldn't get the image of Lily out of her mind. There was something familiar about the girl's face, something that aroused a distant but persistent memory. She rummaged through her old photo albums, looking for a memory that stubbornly remained on the edge of her consciousness. It was then that she found a yellowed photo from almost 30 years ago. In the picture, she appeared next to a young woman with dark hair and a sweet smile. The woman's name was Hope, and she had been her best friend during her youth. They had lost contact when Hope moved to the capital in search of better opportunities. "My God," Eleanor murmured, comparing the features of the photo with her memories of Lily. "She has the same eyes, the same shape of the face." The discovery made her even more determined to help the girl. If her suspicion was correct, Lily could be the granddaughter of her dear friend Hope. But why was she on Clarence's ranch? And where were her parents? While Eleanor planned her next steps in the stable, Lily had managed to drink some milk and eat some pieces of bread. The fresh food and clean water brought temporary relief, but her condition was still serious. The horse remained by her side, vigilant and protective, like a silent guardian who had taken on the responsibility of keeping the girl safe. A night approached again, bringing with it the promise of more cold and suffering. But now, for the first time since it all began, Lily wasn't completely alone. There was someone who cared about her, someone who hadn't abandoned her as Clarence had said about her mother. The third day in the abandoned stable brought an alarming worsening in Lily's condition. The fever had become constant, and the girl alternated between moments of frightening delirium and periods of worrying unconsciousness. Her infected wounds gave off an increasingly strong odor, and red spots began to appear around the cuts, indicating that the infection was spreading through her small body. The horse showed increasing agitation. He whinnied softly whenever Lily's breathing became more labored, and his nervous pacing through the stable made it clear that the animal understood the seriousness of the situation. Several times he positioned himself near the entrance of the stable, as if wanting to draw attention to the girl's condition. Clarence, who had decided to completely ignore Lily's existence in recent days, began to feel bothered by the noises coming from the stable. The horse's constant whinnying was disrupting his morning reading routine, and some employees had commented on strange sounds coming from that direction. "Damn animal," he muttered, closing the newspaper in irritation. "If it keeps making that noise, I'll have to take more drastic action." But Clarence's real concern wasn't the noise. He began to realize that he might have underestimated the situation. If something serious happened to the girl, it could attract unwanted attention, curious neighbors, inconvenient questions, possible investigations. All of this could complicate his business and reveal secrets that he preferred to keep buried. It was then that he thought of Janelle Sampson, a woman of 45, known throughout the region for her knowledge of home medicine and healing plants. Janelle lived in a small house on the outskirts of Willow Creek, where she kept a garden full of medicinal herbs that she herself cultivated with meticulous care. The healer had sun-browned skin marked by the sun and years of outdoor work, black hair with a few grey strands tied in a long braid, and brown eyes that seemed to see beyond superficial appearances. Her calloused hands carried the wisdom of decades caring for people who couldn't afford private doctors. Clarence mounted his chestnut horse and followed the dirt road to Janelle's house. He had never needed her services before, but he knew her reputation. The woman was discreet, efficient, and didn't ask unnecessary questions when the payment was adequate. "Janelle," he called, dismounting in front of the simple but well-kept house. "I need to talk to you." The healer appeared at the door, drying her hands on a raw cotton apron. She observed Clarence with cautious curiosity. Knowing the rancher's reputation in the region, it wasn't common for him to seek her out, and this aroused her immediate attention. "Good morning, Mr. Blackwood," she greeted him respectfully. "How can I help you?" "I have a situation on my property," he said, choosing his words carefully. "A child with some infected wounds. I need you to take a look, but with total discretion. It's a private matter." Janelle narrowed her eyes slightly. There was something in the way Clarence spoke that didn't make her comfortable, but her vocation, to heal, spoke louder than her suspicions. If there was a child suffering, she had a duty to help. "I can take a look," she agreed. but I'll need to examine the child properly and use the remedies I deem necessary. Of course, Clarence hurried. You'll have complete freedom to do whatever is needed. I only ask for absolute discretion on the matter. Janelle prepared her worn leather bag, placing inside jars with tinctures, dried herbs, homemade ointments, and some basic treatment instruments. She had learned the art of healing from her grandmother, who in turn had inherited the knowledge from previous generations of wise women. The way to the ranch was made in tense silence. Clarence seemed eager to resolve the situation quickly, while Janelle mentally prepared herself for what she might find. Her experience told her that when someone like Clarence Blackwood asked for discretion, there was usually more behind the story than he revealed. When they arrived at the abandoned stable, the first shock was seeing the degrading state of the place. Janelle couldn't hide her indignation when she realized that a child was being kept in such precarious conditions. The second shock was immediately recognizing who the girl lying next to the white horse was. "Good heavens," she murmured, kneeling quickly beside Lily. "It's Rosalie's daughter." Clarence stiffened. "You know her mother?" Janelle didn't answer immediately. She was too busy examining the girl's critical condition. The fever was extremely high, the wounds were severely infected, and signs of dehydration were evident. But what shocked her most was realizing that this was the same child she had helped bring into the world 4 years earlier. "I was Rosalie's midwife when this girl was born," she said finally, her voice full of contained emotion. "I remember perfectly. It was a difficult birth, but she was born strong and healthy." The revelation hit Clarence like lightning. He didn't expect Janelle to have a personal connection with Rosalie and her daughter. This complicated the situation significantly, but now it was too late to turn back. "Where's Rosalie?" Janelle asked, beginning to gently clean Lily's wounds with an antiseptic solution she had prepared with herbs. "Why is this child here in these conditions?" "Rosalie left," Clarence lied, "abandoned her daughter and disappeared without explanation. I'm just taking care of the situation. Temporarily." Janelle didn't believe the presented version for a second. She knew Rosalie well enough to know that the young mother would never abandon her daughter voluntarily. There was something very wrong with that story, but for now, her priority was to save Lily's life. "This infection is very serious," she diagnosed, applying an ointment made with propolis and anti-inflammatory herbs to the wounds. "The fever is dangerously high. If it weren't treated soon, it could have serious consequences." She prepared a tea with peppermint leaves, lemon balm, and other medicinal plants to reduce the fever. With infinite patience, she managed to make Lily drink small sips of the bitter liquid, whispering words of encouragement throughout the process. The horse watched every movement of Janelle with concentrated attention, as if assessing whether she represented a threat or help for the girl. When he realized that the healer's care brought relief to Lily, the animal relaxed slightly, allowing her to work without interference. "I'll need to come back tomorrow," Janelle informed Clarence. "And in the next few days as well. This child needs constant care until the infection is completely controlled." "All right," he agreed quickly. "But remember what we talked about, discretion." Janelle stared directly into his eyes. "My obligation is to this child's health. I'll do whatever is necessary to save her." As Janelle finished the first treatment, Lily opened her eyes for the first time in hours. The fever had decreased slightly, and she managed to focus her gaze on the healer's kind face. There was something familiar about those features, a vague memory of an important moment in her life, even though she was too small to consciously remember her own birth. "Mommy," she whispered in a weak voice. "No, dear," Janelle replied softly, stroking the girl's sweaty hair. "But I'll take care of you. It will be okay." When Janelle finished the treatment and prepared to leave, she made a discovery that would completely change her perspective on the whole situation. As she helped Lily settle down better, she noticed a small birthmark on the girl's wrist, a crescent-shaped mark that she remembered perfectly having seen before. Not on Rosalie, but on someone she had known years ago, someone who had been very important in Clarence Blackwood's life before everything went wrong tragically and mysteriously. 2 weeks had passed since Janelle began caring for Lily, and the transformation in the girl was remarkable. The fever had subsided completely, the wounds were healing well, and she had regained some of the weight she had lost. But along with the physical improvement, something more disturbing began to emerge. Fragments of memories that haunted her, dreams and moments of quietude. During a hot July afternoon, while Janelle was changing the dressings on the wounds that were almost healed, Lily suddenly stirred, her eyes widening with sudden terror. "The water was dark," she murmured, clinging to Janelle's arm. "Mommy was screaming. She was scared." Janelle stopped what she was doing and focused on the girl's words. In recent days, Lily had begun to talk about confused fragments of a night that seemed to have marked her deeply. "Tell me about that night, dear," Janelle encouraged softly. "What do you remember?" "Rain," Lily said, her small eyes fixed on some distant point. "A lot of rain. Mommy was carrying me and she was running. There was a man shouting, an angry man." The horse, who had become a constant presence beside the girl during the treatments, raised his head and whinnied softly, as if he was also affected by Lily's disturbing memories. Janelle felt her heart race. The girl's fragmented descriptions began to form a worrying picture, especially when combined with what she knew about Rosalie's disappearance. "Do you remember anything else about that night?" she asked, trying to keep her voice calm so as not to scare the child. Lily closed her eyes, concentrating. "The man pushed Mommy. She fell near the big water. I cried a lot, and the man said that Mommy had to go away forever." The revelation made Janelle tremble. The big water that Lily mentioned could only be the ranch's pond, an isolated place where Clarence used to solve his private problems away from curious eyes. That same afternoon, on the other side of the fence, Eleanor continued her silent surveillance. She had established a routine of leaving fresh food hidden near the stable whenever possible, and she had noticed that the girl was visibly better. But there was something that bothered her deeply. During one of her incursions to collect medicinal herbs, she had overheard conversations between the ranch employees, whispered comments about the girl that the boss is keeping hidden and strange. Things that happened to her mother. Pieces of a dark puzzle began to fit together in Eleanor's mind. "Timmy," she called her grandson, who was helping to husk corn for the corn pudding. "Do you remember seeing any young woman working at Clarence's ranch last year?" The boy thought for a moment. "I remember, Grandma, a pretty girl with dark hair. She always passed by here early in the morning, carrying a little girl. She stopped sometimes to buy eggs from you." Eleanor felt a chill run down her spine. The description matched perfectly with her growing suspicions about Lily's identity. "And do you know what happened to that girl?" she insisted. "I don't know, Grandma. One day, she simply stopped showing up." The employees commented that she had left suddenly, but they found it strange because she had left some things behind. Eleanor's unease increased even further. Women didn't abandon their jobs and their little daughters without very serious reasons. There was definitely something wrong with the official version of Rosalie's disappearance. Meanwhile, in the main house of the ranch, Clarence received a visit that made him extremely nervous. Mark, his youngest son of 23, had returned unexpectedly from his veterinary studies in the capital. Mark was physically similar to his father, but with a completely different personality. Where Clarence was cruel and calculating, the young man showed compassion and a sense of justice. His studies at the university had broadened his worldview, and he often questioned his father's authoritarian methods. "Dad, the employees are commenting on strange things," said Mark, sitting on the porch next to Clarence. "They say you're keeping a child in the abandoned stable. Is that true?" Clarence almost choked on the coffee he was drinking. What nonsense! Is that? The employees like to make up stories. So you don't mind if I take a look at the stable? Mark challenged, watching his father's reaction carefully. Of course I don't mind, Clarence lied, trying to sound indifferent. But there's nothing interesting there, just old and useless things. Mark didn't believe his father's evasive answer. There was something in Clarence's body language that indicated nervousness and guilt. He decided that he would investigate on his own as soon as he had the opportunity. In the late afternoon, when Janelle was finishing another care session with Lily, the girl had another episode of fragmented memories. This time, the memories were more vivid and disturbing. The man had a scar on his hand, she said, tracing an invisible line in the air. Here, between the fingers. And he had a gold ring with a red stone. Janelle turned pale. The description that Lily made corresponded exactly to Clarence Blackwood. The scar was the result of an accident with an agricultural tool years ago, and the ring with the red stone was a piece that he constantly wore as a symbol of status. "Honey," Janelle said carefully, "are you sure that it was this man who pushed your mummy?" Lily nodded, her eyes filling with tears. "He said that Mummy had seen things she shouldn't have seen. He said that she had to go away, or something bad would happen to me too." The final revelation confirmed Janelle's worst fears. Clarence had not only expelled Rosalie from the ranch, he had used the threat against her own daughter to force her to leave. And now, with Rosalie out of the way, he kept Lily in deplorable conditions, possibly to ensure that she never revealed what she had witnessed. As the sun began to set, Mark put his investigation plan into action. He waited for his father to retire to his quarters and then headed discreetly to the abandoned stable. What he found there left him horrified and furious. Lily was sleeping next to the white horse, but even in the dark, Mark could see the precarious conditions in which she was being kept. The smell of dampness, the lack of proper hygiene, the absence of a bed or appropriate blankets. All of this contrasted drastically with the comfort of the main house. "My God," he murmured, kneeling carefully so as not to scare the girl. "What has my father done?" The horse watched him with initial distrust, but something in Mark's respectful posture must have reassured him, because the animal didn't show aggression. Mark spent a few minutes observing the scene, his mind processing the implications of what he was seeing. There was a child being kept in inhumane conditions on his own family property, and his father had lied blatantly about it. When he returned to the house, he was determined to get answers. He found Clarence in his office, examining papers related to the ranch's business. "Dad, we need to talk," said Mark, closing the door behind him, "about the girl in the stable." Clarence raised his eyes slowly, realizing that he could no longer deny the situation. "What do you want to know?" "I want to know why you're keeping a child in deplorable conditions. I want to know who she is and where her parents are. And I want to know why you lied to me." The confrontation had begun, and Clarence knew that he would have to choose his words very carefully. His youngest son had always been the most questioning in the family, and now he would have to face an interrogation that could reveal very dangerous secrets. The confrontation between Mark and Clarence in the office of the main house lasted until the early hours of the morning. The young veterinarian didn't accept his father's evasive explanations about Lily's presence on the ranch, and his insistence on getting true answers was making Clarence increasingly cornered and dangerous. "She's the daughter of a former employee who abandoned the child to me," Clarence repeated for the 10th time, his patience running out quickly. "I'm just taking care of the situation until I find a suitable place for her." "In an abandoned stable?" Mark retorted, rising from his chair. In indignation, "Dad, that child is being mistreated. Anyone can see that." Clarence slammed his fist on the table, causing the papers and pens to jump. "You don't understand the complexities of the situation. That girl is not our responsibility, and the sooner she leaves here, the better for everyone." The discussion was interrupted by a sound coming from the courtyard. The white horse was whinnying loudly and repeatedly, an alarming sound that cut through the silence of the night. Mark ran to the window and saw movement near the abandoned stable. "There's someone there," he said, pointing to the shadows that were moving towards the stable. Clarence approached the window, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. In the dark, he could distinguish the silhouette of a woman moving away quickly from the place. It was Eleanor, who had decided to pay a nighttime visit to check on Lily. "Damn nosy old woman," Clarence muttered through his teeth. "She shouldn't be here." "Who is it?" Mark asked. "The neighbor next door. Eleanor Fairbanks. She's always been too curious about other people's business." Mark watched his father closely. There was something in Clarence's reaction that indicated more than simple irritation with a curious neighbor. There was genuine fear that someone would discover something important. Meanwhile, in the stable, Lily had woken up with the noise of the horse's whinnies. She had been restless for several days, her memories becoming clearer and more disturbing. During sleep, she had dreamed again of that terrible night, but this time the details were even more vivid. "I saw the papers," she murmured to the horse, as if the animal could understand her words. "Mommy was looking at papers in the office when the man arrived. She got scared and picked me up." The horse approached her, lowering his head to her height, in a gesture of comfort. In recent days, the connection between them had become even deeper. The animal seemed to understand not only the girl's physical needs, but also her emotional suffering. The next morning, Janelle arrived for her daily visit and immediately noticed that something had changed. Lily was more talkative, but also more agitated. The memories that had been fragmented were organizing in her young mind, forming an increasingly coherent account of the events that preceded her mother's disappearance. "Janelle," said Lily, holding the healer's hand, "I remember more things about that night." "Tell me, dear," Janelle encouraged, preparing herself to hear revelations that could be even more disturbing. "Mommy was messing with the bad man's papers. She said she had found something important, something about my grandpa's land. She said she was going to tell someone in town." Janelle felt a chill. The mention of Lily's grandfather's land opened a new perspective on the motives behind the conflict between Rosalie and Clarence. It wasn't just a labor issue. There were property issues involved. "Do you remember anything else about those papers?" she asked carefully. Lily closed her eyes, concentrating. "It had my grandpa's name written on it, and a map. Mommy said that the land was ours, not the bad man's." The revelation was like a bomb for Janelle. If Lily was telling the truth, Clarence had not only expelled Rosalie from the ranch, he had possibly stolen land that legitimately belonged to her family. That afternoon, while Janelle was caring for Lily's last dressings, Mark appeared at the stable. The healer tensed, not knowing if Clarence's son represented a threat or a possible help. "I'm not going to hurt you," Mark said immediately, noticing the tension in the air. "I came because I need to understand what's happening here." Janelle watched him carefully. There was something different about this young man compared to his father. His eyes showed genuine concern, not the calculating coldness that she knew in Clarence. "Your father hasn't told you the truth about this girl," she said finally. "She wasn't abandoned. She was separated from her mother against both their wills." Mark knelt beside Lily, who watched him with curiosity mixed with fear. "How do you know that?" "Because I helped bring this child into the world," Janelle revealed, "and because she's starting to remember the night her mother was forced to leave." The next 2 hours were a shocking revelation for Mark. He heard about Lily's fragmented memories, about Janelle's suspicions regarding what had really happened to Rosalie, and about the possibility of land issues being involved in the conflict. "My God," he murmured, running his hands through his hair. "If this is true, my father—" "Your father is capable of very bad things," Janelle completed, "and this child is the only living witness to what he did." Mark looked at Lily, who was playing silently with the horse's mane. The girl's innocence contrasted drastically with the serious accusations that were being made about his father. "What do you want me to do?" he asked Janelle. "Find a way to protect this child," she replied firmly, "and help me find out what really happened to Rosalie." That night, Mark rummaged through his father's office while Clarence slept. He was looking for any document that could confirm or deny the accusations related to Rosalie's family's land. What he found left him horrified. Hidden in a safe that he managed to open using a combination he had observed his father use years before, Mark discovered a folder full of documents. Land deeds, altered death certificates, sales contracts with falsified dates, all indicating an elaborate scheme to steal properties from vulnerable families. Among the papers, he found specific documents about the land that had belonged to Lily's grandfather. The property had been acquired by Clarence for a ridiculously low price, taking advantage of the desperate situation of the family after an accident that had left the patriarch incapacitated. "My father is a criminal," Mark whispered to himself, his hands trembling as he examined the evidence. And Rosalie discovered that. The discovery perfectly explained why Clarence had reacted so violently when Rosalie found the compromising documents. She wasn't just an inconvenient employee. She was a direct threat to the illegal businesses he had built over the years. Mark carefully saved some of the most incriminating documents, knowing that they would be crucial to protect Lily and possibly to find Rosalie. But he also knew that he was putting himself in danger by confronting his own father's criminal activities. When he returned to his room, Mark could barely sleep. His mind was seething with plans on how to protect Lily and how to confront Clarence with the evidence he had discovered. He knew that he would have to act quickly before his father realized that someone had messed with his secret files. Outside, the white horse remained vigilant near the stable, as if sensing that important changes were coming. The animal had become not only Lily's protector, but also a silent witness to all the events that unfolded on Blackwood Ranch. The storm that was approaching wasn't just meteorological. It was the inevitable result of years of lies, crimes, and cruelty that were finally beginning to come to light. Christmas Eve arrived with a palpable tension in the air. Clarence had discovered that someone had messed with his secret documents and was in a state of growing paranoia. His bloodshot eyes from insomnia and his trembling hands betrayed the despair of a man who felt his lies crumbling around him. Throughout the week, he had noticed strange movements on the property. Eleanor appeared more often near the fence. Janelle asked increasingly direct questions about the past, and Mark watched him with a disturbing intensity. Clarence knew that he was being investigated, and this made him increasingly dangerous. "I have to resolve this once and for all," he murmured, pacing nervously through the office in the early hours of the morning. "The girl knows too much, and people are asking too many questions." His decision was made. He would take Lily away in the early hours of the morning, claiming that he had found a distant orphanage that would agree to take care of her. No one would know where she had gone, and without witnesses, all the secrets would remain buried. Meanwhile, in the stable, Lily slept restlessly next to the horse. Her memories had become completely clear in recent days, and she now perfectly understood what had happened to her mother. The trauma of separation, combined with the painful clarity of the memories, kept her in a state of constant alert. The horse, as always, remained vigilant. In recent months, the animal had developed an extraordinary perception about the dangers that surrounded his little protégé. That night, his instincts were particularly sharp, as if sensing that something definitive was about to happen. At around 3 in the morning, Clarence quietly left the main house, carrying a rope and a flashlight. His plan was simple. Tie up Lily, put her in his pickup truck, and take her to a place where she could never tell her version of the facts again. But when he approached the stable, the horse immediately sensed his presence and his malevolent intentions. With a loud and piercing whinny that echoed throughout the ranch, the animal began to make a commotion that would wake all the neighbors for miles around. "Damn animal!" Clarence growled, trying to approach Lily. "Shut up!" But the horse not only continued whinnying. He positioned himself aggressively between Clarence and the girl, showing his teeth and stamping his hooves menacingly on the ground. It was the first time that the animal had shown direct aggression, and this surprised even Clarence. The noise woke not only the ranch employees, but also Eleanor, who immediately understood that something serious was happening. She woke Timmy, and together they went to investigate the origin of the commotion. Mark was also awakened by the desperate whinnies. Wearing only pants and a shirt, he ran towards the stable, carrying a flashlight and the incriminating documents that he had saved as evidence. Janelle, who lived farther away, also heard the sounds and decided to investigate. Something in her, Hila's heart, told her that Lily was in mortal danger. When all these people arrived at the stable, almost simultaneously, they found a scene that none of them would ever forget. Clarence was trying to lasso the horse with a rope, while Lily cried desperately, clinging to the legs of the animal that continued to protect her. "Dad, what are you doing?" Mark shouted, running to place himself between Clarence and the horse. "Get out of the way!" Clarence bellowed, completely losing control. "You don't understand. That girl is going to destroy everything I've built." It was then that a weak but unmistakable voice echoed in the darkness. "Lily, my daughter." Everyone turned towards the voice and saw a thin and weakened figure approaching slowly. It was Rosalie, supported by Eleanor, who had found her hidden in the house of a distant cousin 3 days before and had brought her for this final confrontation. Rosalie was visibly ill, with a pale face and sunken eyes, but her arms stretched desperately towards her daughter. She had survived all these months hidden, slowly recovering from the physical and emotional wounds caused by Clarence, and waiting for the right moment to get her daughter back. "Rosalie," Clarence whispered, recoiling instinctively. "You should have stayed away. You lied to everyone," she said in a weak but determined voice. "You said I had abandoned my daughter, when in reality you expelled me after discovering his crimes." Lily let go of the horse and ran towards her mother, her small arms wrapping around Rosalie's slender waist. "Mommy, I knew you hadn't abandoned me." Eleanor stepped forward, her voice filled with indignation. "Clarence Blackwood, the whole community is going to know what you've done. Keeping a child in inhumane conditions, threatening an innocent mother, stealing land that didn't belong to you." Mark pulled out the documents he had found, waving them in the air. "I have the proof of everything here, Dad. Forged deeds, fraudulent contracts, evidence of how you stole Rosalie's family's land." Janelle approached, holding Lily's hand firmly. "And this child can testify to everything she saw that night. She remembers every detail." Clarence looked around, seeing himself surrounded by all the people he had tried to deceive and silence. His breathing became labored, and beads of sweat ran down his face, despite the cold of the early morning. "You don't understand," he stammered, his hands trembling violently. "I built all this. I can't lose everything." It was then that his body couldn't take the pressure anymore. Years of repressed guilt, constant paranoia, and fear of discovery culminated in a complete nervous breakdown. Clarence fell to his knees on the stable floor, his hands covering his face as he sobbed uncontrollably. "I didn't want to. It wasn't supposed to be like this," he repeated between tears, his mind finally succumbing to the weight of his crimes. Mark watched his father's collapse with a mixture of sadness and relief. "Janelle, Eleanor, can you help take Rosalie and Lily to the house? I'll take care of my father." The horse, realizing that the danger had passed, finally calmed down. He followed Lily and Rosalie to the main house, as if wanting to make sure that his protégé would be truly safe. In the days that followed, Clarence was admitted to a psychiatric clinic in the state capital, where he would receive treatment for his nervous breakdown. Mark temporarily took over the administration of the ranch, and his first decision was to transform the property into a foster home for children in vulnerable situations. Rosalie, with Janelle's care and Eleanor's affection, began to recover both physically and emotionally. The land stolen by Clarence was legally returned to her family, guaranteeing a secure future for her and Lily. Lily, finally reunited with her mother, began a journey of healing that would be long but hopeful. Her physical scars healed completely. Under Janelle's care, and her emotional wounds began to heal with Rosalie's unconditional love and the support of her new extended family. The white horse officially became Lily's companion. Mark, recognizing the special connection between them, decided that the animal would always remain by the girl's side. Eleanor became a loving adoptive grandmother, teaching Lily how to bake cookies and telling stories of local traditions. A sunny January afternoon, 6 months after that transformative Christmas Eve, Lily ran freely through the green fields of the ranch alongside her protective horse. Her laughter echoed through the pure mountain air, a sound of pure joy that contrasted dramatically with the suffering that had marked her life only a few months before. Rosalie watched the scene from the porch of the house, now renovated and transformed into a welcoming home. Janelle was by her side, preparing herbal tea, while Eleanor finished telling a story to other children who had arrived at the new foster home. "Thank you," said Rosalie, looking at Janelle and Eleanor. "You saved our lives." "No," replied Eleanor with a smile. "You saved yourselves. We just helped to show the way." The white horse whinnied softly as Lily brushed his mane, and at that moment all the people present knew that justice had prevailed. Clarence, institutionalized and ruined, faced the consequences of years of cruelty, while those he had hurt found peace, healing, and hope in a future full of possibilities.